Welcome to the Neural Implant Podcast, where we talk with the people behind the current events and breakthroughs in brain implants in an understandable way, helping bring together various fields involved in neuroprosthetics. Here is your host, Laden Yuracek.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Neural Implant Podcast. Today's guest is Julio Martinez-Clark from Bioaccess, and he does clinical trials in especially Latin America, and being able to not only do it, it's a little bit cheaper, but mostly faster. So if you have a medical device and you need to get FDA approval or pivotal trials, some kind of proof of concept, then they come to you in order to get this evidence, this proof that everything works and that they should, I guess, invest more money, that investors should come on in, right? Yes. Do you want to introduce yourself better than I just did and what you do?
Absolutely, Laden. Thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure to be on your show. Yes, as you said, I help mostly US, a few European companies are also clients of us, but most of our clients are US medical device startups and also biopharma startups who want to do a first-in-human clinical trial overseas. And we have specialized for the past 20 years in bringing them to Latin America, because we think is one of the best places in the world to do this early validation of safety and efficacy of advanced medical technologies.
Okay, great. And so I guess really fast, what is Latin America? And then why is Latin America good for these kind of trials?
Well, Latin America is in the back door of the United States, is in the backyard, and is a region that it wasn't really being looked as a destination for medical device clinical research. For the past 40 years or so, pharma has done research in Latin America, but mostly on advanced stages in phase 2B, phase 3, and phase 4, post-marketing research, but observational trials. But when we started Bioaccess, and I'm going to segue into why we started Bioaccess. My brother Pedro trained at Harvard as an interventional cardiologist, and he became a member of the faculty, assistant professor at the University of Miami, and he worked with his mentor, Dr. William O'Neill, for many years, and they were advising many medical device startups doing cardiovascular trials. And that's really the spark of Bioaccess. They realized that companies in the US didn't have a contract research organization who could understand their language, could understand the speed that they need to get these trials approved really, really fast, because for startups, speed is really the name of the game. The burn rate of these companies is so huge and they have investors breathing on their necks. They need to hit some certain milestones and some value inflection points in their plans that they need to activate sites really, really quickly. And most of these companies go overseas because it's difficult, it's expensive, and it's uncertain in the United States to navigate the FDA waters. To recruit patients is sometimes challenging, and not to mention the cost, the high cost of the healthcare system in the US. So anyway, the point is that these companies look at Latin America as a favorable place, and Pedro and Dr. O'Neill started advising a lot of these companies in their preclinical animal studies and then clinical studies, and realized that there was a need to have a boutique contract research organization just for US medical device startups that wanted to do first-in-human work in the region. And that's why we exist. We are now a team of over 40 employees. We are in over 10 different countries, and we run probably over 50 first-in-human trials. And so this is our specialty, first-in-human trials in Latin America.
That's incredible. Yeah. So, okay. So you said you can do it much faster. What does fast mean? And cheaper as well. You know, cost of healthcare is very high in the US. What does it look like outside of the US? So I guess, what are some numbers or what are some comparisons? What are we looking at?
Yeah. Well, we can activate sites in Panama, for example, in 60 days. I mean, that's record. In the United States, it will probably take you a year or two. I mean, just to get in agreement with the FDA in terms of what they want for you to be able to submit for a first human study in the country. But with the OUS validation, these companies can now approach the FDA, can now approach their investors, and more importantly, they can approach their strategics, the buyers of the companies, because just to make sure the audience understands how this business works, the companies are created from universities because they license the patent out to a group of entrepreneurs who raise the funds and build a team, and they develop the technology with a single purpose in mind, which is to sell the company to Medtronic, Boston Scientific, J&J, the big players. So they need speed, and speed means money, right? So we can activate sites in Panama, in El Salvador, in the Dominican Republic, really, really quickly for these companies, and they can start implanting their devices and scrubbing with the local investigator, get into the OR. They own the OR, and they can, of course, as long as everything is ethical and following international GCP standards, you can just run your trial really quickly and get the
Yeah.
data that you need.
Yeah, that's a huge difference. Yeah, 2 months versus a year, something like this.
Yeah,
And like
exactly.
you said, with the burn rate, or just, even if you're not having a burn rate, that's a huge savings, and you can
Mm,
potentially get it into to improve patients' lives sooner. Okay,
yeah.
so Panama, this is some jungle hospital with, one monkey, on your back, and trying to fight your surgery or something like this. Non-sterile procedures, right? I mean, you and I know that Panama is a very developed
Yeah.
country, and basically is like Miami in terms of
Yeah,
quality and
exactly.
everything like this.
Great
But
analogy.
yeah, so what kind of standard of quality and, I guess, cleanliness, ethics, what's normal there? Is it up to US standards?
Yes, yes. You'll be surprised, Adam. There is a new facility, brand new facility called the Panama Clinic. I think if the president of Panama were to get sick, he will go to the Panama Clinic. I mean, is state of the art. There's another facility, Punta Pacifica Hospital. They are Joint Commission accredited, and they are affiliated with Johns Hopkins University, by the way. So it says a lot about the quality of the healthcare in the country. Even though it's a small country, less than 5 million people, they have about probably 5 good private clinics. El Salvador is an up and coming country as well. I mean, the country, if you follow the news, is being all over the news lately for political reasons, but also for economic reasons, because they are transforming the economy. The new president, well, he's on his second term, but the president Bukele is really, really making an impact in Latin America by bringing El Salvador to the spotlight as one of the most forward-thinking countries in the region. So yeah, I mean, the Dominican Republic is also a great country. It's double the size of El Salvador. Salvador is about 7 million people. Dominican Republic is about 12, and you have great hospitals. I mean, I just came back from El Salvador, from Santiago. I'm sorry, from Dominican Republic, from Santiago, and there's a top hospital. Santiago is the second largest city, by the way, in the North Caribbean coast, and they have a brand new Marriott residences hotel. So a lot of patients from the islands around Turks and Caicos, all these islands, Trinidad and Tobago, they'll fly to the Dominican Republic for advanced medical care.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, and I mean it is a tax haven, right? And a lot of rich people go there to not hide their wealth, but protect their wealth, so they don't want to go all the way to a New York or, a London or something to
Yeah.
get this. So that's also a reason why that exists there. So okay, so what kind of services? I mean, is it medical devices, neurotechnology? I mean, obviously we're the Neural Implant Podcast, so we're interested in neural implants. So I guess what do you deal with, and what kind of capabilities are there in these countries?
Yes, we started in cardiology for obvious reasons, as I alluded to, because of my brother's specialty and Dr. O'Neill's specialty. And we started in structural heart about 20 years ago. And organically, we've moved into other therapeutic areas. People started finding us word of mouth in conferences, etc. And I think our second study was in ophthalmology, and then there was another one in orthopedic devices, and then another one in general surgery, then urology. So we're being in many, many therapeutic areas now, including neurology, as you said. More recently, we just helped Axsoft, a company out of Boston. It's a spin-off of Harvard Labs that they just finished their second round of cases in
Yeah.
Panama at the Panama Clinic. And it was
Actually,
a
yeah.
very,
Paul LeFloch and Axsoft have been
yes,
on the show, so they're friends of the show.
excellent. Excellent. Yes. So we're very proud of being able to help Axsoft with their early feasibility study. It's been a success. There's even a publication on it. And so, yeah, it's all over the news.
That's incredible. Okay, so do you want to talk about more specifically about Axsoft and Paul LeFloch's studies? I mean, obviously you don't have to divulge too many details, confidential things, but I guess especially for the neural implant community, what was striking or remarkable about that?
Well, I think let's first speak about capabilities, because that was your prior question. I didn't answer it correctly, and I'm gonna tie it into this question. For example, when they came to us about a year ago, we needed to find them the perfect site. So our job is to strategize the site search and selection process. We do it professionally, of course. And after that, we do the site activation process, which involves the IRB or Ethics Committee submission and the National Regulatory Agency submission if applies, because in some countries it doesn't apply. And we do the management of the study and the reporting of adverse events, et cetera, and then the closing of the study, including the monitoring of the study. Anyway, so when they came to us about a year ago, we were challenged because this is a very innovative technology. I don't think a study like this was ever done in Latin America, by the way. So there was little experience. It was a science fiction type study because investigators in the region were not really familiar with these type of devices, brain-computer interfaces, which are becoming very, very important in the medical technology or medtech or industry now. I think Elon Musk with the Neuralink started that proliferation of news about these type of devices. So I was very pleased when they approached me because I was dealing with top investigators. I mean, Paul is a PhD from Harvard. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that. So it helps us with our reputation that we're dealing with high caliber clients and sponsors like Axsoft. Anyway, the point is that they came to us and we did the site search and selection, which involves getting the feasibility questionnaire and the study synopsis and broadcasting that to our network. It's a network we built over years, over 20 years of having contacts with all these investigators and hospitals in the region. So we sent a broadcast email and we start receiving answers, positive answers, and they start completing the questionnaire. We upload all the answers to a database, and then we analyze the answers, and then we pre-select the best candidate sites. And then we interview the investigators with the sponsor, in this case, Axsoft. And then we went through the whole process of meetings over Zoom. And then once we determined which were the best candidate investigators, we traveled together. We spent a week with Paul and his team. We went to Panama. I think we went to El Salvador. We went to Colombia. I mean, many places in Latin America, just to interview the investigator, to have lunch or dinner, and to have one-to-one conversations. That's really where you establish rapport and you establish the motivation of the investigator, because that's really key. I mean, you as a startup, you're depositing the future of your company on this one person, right? And on this one site. So you better make sure he's the right person to lead your study and to recruit patients. So in this case, Axsoft decided to activate just one site. Some companies mitigate risk even more, and they activate a second site in another country. So that's advisable. Anyway, the point is that we finally agreed that the Panama Clinic with Dr. Bermudez, who is a leading neurologist in Panama, was going to lead the study, and he's been great. Everybody loves him. I mean, he's recruiting patients. That's all that matters. Yeah.
That's interesting. So yeah, what was that process like? You said you were there for a week. Let's say he picked up the phone, he's like, hey, I need these sites. And then you guys finished the trial. So I guess how long was that timeline if it's not confidential?
No, it's not confidential. I mean, the process to select a site that takes about 60 days to 90 days based on the schedule of everybody involved. As I said, we have to schedule Zoom meetings like this, and then we have to schedule one-to-one meetings. So you have to, account for travel and all that. So that takes a little bit of time and coordination. We handle all that. We handle the transportation, the hotels, or the all the coordination necessary to make sure the sponsor has a smooth experience in the country and safe experience in the country. Because safety is an issue for many people, and we make sure you're always with locals, in good company, and you're well taken care of. So after that, the site activation takes about, well, there's a preparation phase where we put together all the documents that the IRB requires. We translate everything to Spanish. I mean, we work with the sponsor to compile the documents and to fix whatever needs to be fixed. For example, the informed consent needs to be tailored to the country and needs to have specific language that the law requires for that country. So we make sure the protocol, the investigator's brochure, the informed consent, they all tie together really nicely and they all comply with what the IRB is expecting. And we submit and we get approval, usually 45, 60 days. For Axsoft, it took us 60 days because there were some questions that the IRB had and we needed to clarify or to answer. And after that, it was smooth sailing. I mean, as I said, we just completed the second round of cases a few months back, and it looks like we're gonna do another round of cases very soon. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. This episode is sponsored by Black Swan IP, a boutique law firm specializing in intellectual property for neurotech and medtech startups, founded by Eugene Daneshvar, who holds both a JD and PhD in biomedical engineering. Black Swan IP helps innovators secure patents, develop smart IP strategies, and even navigate funding. Whether you're an early-stage startup or scaling your medtech venture, they'll work with you using flat-fee pricing and deep technical expertise. Learn more at blackswan-ip.com. So that is something that's something that I wanted to ask too. I mean, about with the ethics and everything, like this is something you and I actually have been dealing with in a rushed way.
Yeah.
The ethics of institutional review board. So this is all done in the same standards as the US. Do you want to talk about this?
Absolutely.
Why is it the same, or I guess if people are nervous about, oh, it's Latin America, it's a crazy place and whatever, it's wild cocaine place or something like this. I don't know, fighters and everything like this. I guess if the people are nervous about this, how do you relieve that stress?
Yeah, well, I always say CNN and news outlets, they sell bad news, right? Because that's how they make money. People love bad news. I mean, they don't talk about the good stuff. And there are many good things happening in Latin America, by the way. And the sites, the IRBs, they all follow international ICH, GCP, good clinical practice standards or guidelines, which are guidelines set by the World Health Organization. So if you are a professional in clinical research, you follow these standards. And also you as the sponsor, you have to make sure the site that you select after all these round of interviews that I just described, it follows ICH GCP standards. And there's also a new thing in Latin America, which is the Global Clinical Site Certification. It's an organization out of England, out of London, and they are called the International Accrediting Organization for Clinical Research. And they are fast moving into the Americas in general, including many countries in Latin America. Colombia has been very receptive. Panama, we're certifying CEVAXIN, which is a site network in Panama. We're very proud of that. There's another one called CMN Research, also in Panama, who is getting certified by this global organization. So that says a lot about the quality of research in the region. And as I said, if you are a sponsor and you don't ensure that your investigator and the research staff and everybody involved, including the CRO, follows ICH GCP standards, you're going to have issues presenting the data to the FDA or to your investor or to your strategics. So it's in everybody's benefit to follow international guidelines. Even the site or the ethics committee, they want to sell themselves because they all want the business. It's a business for these clinics in Latin America to receive these international sponsors. So it adds to the credibility, and it's a marketing thing to say that they follow international standards and they're all properly trained. So yeah, everybody's trained in Latin America. It's not the Wild West or banana republics that we're dealing with professional investigators,
Yeah.
and sites.
And you mentioned showing this to the FDA as well. So but you're mainly targeting more the initial, pivotal trials, the initial feasibility, everything like this. But you could show this to the FDA as well. Could you use this to get FDA approval, or you were talking about a mix before when we talked offline?
Yeah, that's a great question, Latam. The way it works is that the FDA, for approval for market clearance in the United States, they want to see a pivotal study. A pivotal study, just to make sure everybody understands, is a large multi-centric study, usually includes 100 patients, 20 sites. It's a multi-million-dollar investment. Usually happens in the United States. You can negotiate a percentage of the clinical data for the pivotal study that can come from overseas. So usually the FDA will accept a 70-30 split, 70% of the data, US data, 30% of the data, all US data. And the FDA has guidelines for these. They basically say, as long as the data is captured following ICH GCP guidelines, we're going to accept it. Is the burden of proof is on you as a sponsor to show us that you train everybody in the research team, that the IRB was trained, and et cetera, et cetera. They have a certification of some sort, whatever. Just show us that you gather the data professionally. You use a third-party monitor, right? So things like that. However, when we're talking about a first-in-human trial, Adam, the first-in-human trial is a first experience validating the safety and efficacy of the product in a clinical setting. So this is usually data that you show your investors, you show your strategics, and you show the FDA just for conversation purposes. Just to say to the FDA, we just had a recent experience in Panama, in Colombia, in El Salvador, in Dominican Republic. We did really well. Look at the data, look at the stats, look at the results of the study. We would like to submit an application, a formal application for an IDE, for investigational device exemption, so that we get approval for a pivotal study in the United States. So you don't necessarily use the data for market clearance. You use the data to convince the FDA that you have merit to get a pivotal study approved in the United States.
Got it.
Which is going to lead you to a market clearance later if you finish the pivotal study.
Got it. Yeah, that's pretty cool. And so, okay, so you have the speed, and then you mentioned also there's a cost component too, like there's a cost savings, right? That's why you would do this even split. And then
yes,
when we were talking before, you were talking about, I guess, the willingness of the patients is different. Do you want to talk about this?
Great point. Well, in terms of cost, of course, if you activate a site really quickly, like in 60 days, 90 days, you're saving a lot of money, right? That's a startup. You have this burn rate that we discussed, and you're going to satisfy your investors and your strategics, and everybody will be happy if you activate a site really fast so you can hit your milestones. That in itself is saving a lot of money already. However, we all know that the cost of living in Latin America is way lower than in the United States, mostly because of a lot of these countries have different currencies. So the exchange rate is favorable usually versus the US dollar. So, well, Panama is a dollarized economy, El Salvador is a dollarized economy, but still the cost of living is lower than in the US, and the cost of procedures is lower than in the United States. So companies usually save around 30%, up to 50%, I've seen savings. I mean, the same procedure will cost about half in a country like Colombia or the Dominican Republic versus the same procedure in the United States. So yeah, that's on the cost side. And in regards to patients participating, what's really interesting in Latin America, LATAM, is that because of most of the healthcare systems in Latin America are public, and on paper, they look perfect. But in reality, patients suffer when they try to access the system. They are being put in long waiting lists just to have an appointment with a primary care physician. Whether the specialist is even worse. If that specialist diagnoses the patients with a high cost procedure, then the wait list is a year or so longer. So it's just difficult. Access to medications is difficult. I've seen patients in Colombia waiting from 4 or 5 in the morning outside a pharmacy, waiting until they open at 8 so they can get the medication and go to work. I mean, it's just difficult. So if you offer a clinical trial to a patient who is suffering like this, then he or she will likely accept. And also because there's a lot of physician-patient trust. Patients perceive doctors. My father was a doctor, so I grew up seeing my father as an authority figure in my neighborhood, in my community, in my city. He was a leader because he was a doctor. He trained in Bogota, and my hometown was Barranquilla, so it was still a smaller city. So if you come from Bogota, from the top university, you are seen like a god. So patients really trust doctors in Latin America because they are authorities I mean, they're putting their trust, their health in their hands. So anyway, the point is that patients are more willing to participate in clinical trials in Latin America than in other parts of the world. It is not only because I say it, there's data to back it up. There are papers on this. The compliance, patient recruitment is faster, compliance is faster, because imagine if you're a patient who is subject to the suffering that I just described, and you send the patient an Uber driver to pick him up or her with a family member. You bring them to the hospital, you treat them with dignity, you give them a breakfast, a snack, lunch. Sometimes they have to spend 6 hours at the hospital signing papers, doing several tests. So they need to be treated with dignity. And then you send them back in another Uber driver, and you pick them up again for the follow-up visit, et cetera, et cetera. So yes, they're more willing to participate in trials.
Wow. Yeah. No, that's incredible. And then is there any issue with, I guess, ethics of this, or like the patients being motivated because they get better quality care or something like this? I mean, is that ever an issue?
Well, remember, they are receiving two intrinsic benefits. The first one is fast access to the system, as I just said. I mean, fast access to medications, fast access to all the tests that they need, that they haven't had in a while, because it's just difficult to have access to that. And sometimes you have to pay out of pocket because you don't want to wait for a year or something to see a doctor. So you have to pay out of pocket for medications and for appointments. So a trial is really a lifesaver for a lot of these patients. That in itself is a benefit. And second, Ladam, is access to an innovative therapy that doesn't exist in the local market, because it is really sad that only a small percentage of all the FDA-approved products in the United States are available in Latin America, because it needs the willingness of the manufacturer to go to those countries, and they don't really care, to be honest with you, because they care about selling in the bigger markets. North America, Europe, probably Japan. If you're adventurous enough, China, but that's another story. That's very risky, intellectual property issues and stuff. But Latin America is like rest of the world. And that's usually the financial statements in the annual report, rest of the world, Latin America. They either purposely target Latin America, which doesn't really happen that often, or there's a distributor that finds out about the product in a trade show or something, and they somehow convinces the manufacturer to sign an agreement for this individual or this company to distribute and sell the product locally. So what I'm saying is that patients have, with a clinical trial, they have fast access to medical innovation that otherwise they wouldn't have access to. So that in itself is also a huge advantage. And patients don't really want to get paid, to be honest with you, because they're already being paid. I mean, with intangibles. So they're really, really willing to participate. Of course, everything is done ethically. There are laws in each one of these countries that regulate clinical research. So yeah, they're not banana republics at all. Sometimes my clients complain that the red tape sometimes even higher than at the FDA level.
Yeah, that's that's kind of funny, you know. You think you're getting into, like you said, kind of a banana republic. Oh yeah, it'll be done super fast, and then yeah, you have the more red tape, and things might be slower. But yeah, that's really exciting, and hopefully, you know, people, if they are developing a technology, you know, medical device technology, kind of like me, you know, I'm in the process of doing this, and really interested in getting this first feasibility data out. And so what are some steps? What should the timeline look like, or at what point should they contact you? When do you want to be involved, I guess?
Yeah. Well, going back to the prior comment, Ladan, I think it's key to mention a case that we just had very recently. It's a company that did a study in Kazakhstan, Central Asia. And it looks like they were spoiled. I mean, they did everything so easily. Probably the burden and the red tape was so low in that country that they were expecting the same thing in Latin America. And they hit a wall with us when we presented with the requirements and everything they had to comply with, and they backed out because they were not prepared to face the scrutiny of an IRB in Latin America, by the way. So that says a lot about the region. The To answer your question, I usually get involved very early. We are very active on LinkedIn, on social media in general. We produce a lot of content. I have my own podcast, so people know us already. We're the only ones doing this type of work in Latin America, by the way. So it's easy to find us, and there's a lot of word of mouth in the industry about us. Good or bad, I don't know, but they find us and they contact us. The point is that I usually get involved very early. I have initial calls with startups when they're just raising funds. So they just want a budget. They just want to put together a plan. They need a timeline. They need a ballpark number to budget for study and for the overall round of financing that they need. And as you know, that usually takes a while, months, years. So sometimes I get an email a year or 2 or 3 later. Hey, Julio, it's me. We spoke 3 years ago, 2 years ago about a trial. We're ready now. We already have the money in the bank. We just closed the round, whatever. So that usually happens like that. So companies approach me very early so I can give them advice. I can give them some pointers so that they can put together their business plan. So yeah. And the other companies are ready. They're ready because they already raised funds and they didn't know about me, and somebody told us about me, and they called me and we set everything fast. Some other companies, by the way, approach me, and this has happened a lot, because they failed in Latin America. They did things the wrong way, and they activated a site that is not recruiting, that is not moving fast enough because the investigator promised so much and didn't deliver. And then they're desperate. They come to me like, Julio, rescue me, help me, save me, do something, but I need to move forward. Yeah.
And that might be too late, right? You might be like, oh, okay, we
Yeah.
got to restart.
We have to restart. We have to
Yeah.
fix everything here.
Wow,
Yeah, it happens a lot.
that's crazy. Well, yeah, Julio, this is great. I think this is a really cool opportunity or option for people who, you know, who are looking to build out a medical device, you know, company, and the data required for that. It's kind of a for us in the US, we think of ourselves living, we live on the island. We're on the perfect island. Everybody wants to come here. Nobody wants to go anywhere else, you know, but there are definite advantages going somewhere else. And me, you know,
Yeah.
somebody who's lived abroad, I see like, oh, other places exist.
Yes,
And
exactly. Other places exist.
so let's go utilize some of those benefits of those other places. But is there anything that we
Absolutely.
didn't talk about that you wanted to mention?
Well, I think the issue of of having good advice is really key, of having local help, as I just alluded to. Many companies, Latin, unfortunately, fail in Latin America and other parts of the world as well, because they think the way to go about our OUS clinical trial is one way, but it's really another way, which is usually the right way. We've been doing this for 20 years, so we already know how to execute these studies, how to select sites, We felt a lot, we've learned a lot, and that's why we are now professional. We think we are the best in the industry because we felt miserably a lot. And I came from another industry. I came from the telecom and networking industry. My brother was just a physician, and Dr. Neil, they were just top interventional cardiologists, but they were not CRO people. They were not business people who knew how to create a CRO. So we had to create our CRO from the scratch, trial and error. So we've learned a lot throughout the years. So finding good professional local help is absolutely key in these studies, because as we alluded to, you as a startup you are depositing the future of your company on this investigator in this specific country. So you better make sure that trial moves forward and recruits patients. You gather your data, clean data, quality data, with very little hiccups, issues, problems. So that's why you need help. I mean, you don't want to be in a predicament where you invested money and time activating a site in a country, and the investigator, this particular investigator that I'm talking about is in a country that I don't want to mention because, right, for obvious reasons. The guy trained at Stanford and everything. I mean, top credentials. He moved back to his country and he's a leading ophthalmologist, but he's not recruiting patients. He's not getting the approvals fast. So now the company is contacting me and they're desperate for me to do something about it and activate another site. So getting professional help is really key, and that's why Bioaccess exists.
Yeah, excellent. Excellent. So this is very good. If people want to contact you, how do they do so?
Well, I'm very active on LinkedIn. I'm very easily findable on Google. So just search Julio Martinez-Clark or just search Bioaccess or medical device clinical trials Latin America. And we're going to be on top because we're the only ones talking about it on my podcast, on my articles, or just go to bioaccessla for LatinAmerica.com.
Excellent. And yeah, any links will be in the show notes as well, so people can look at that. But Julio, thanks so much. This has been excellent.
Adam, thank you so much for having me here.
Hope you enjoyed the show and were able to learn something new, bringing together different fields in novel ways. Until next time on the Neural Implant Podcast.